Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the TIFF Industry Conference. My name is Melissa D'Agostino. I'm the associate producer here at the conference, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this morning's session. Thank you for joining us on this slightly dreary, I think I can say, morning. We really appreciate you being here. To begin, I would like to acknowledge that the sacred land on which we stand has been a site of human activity for 15,000 years. This land is the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we feel privileged and grateful to meet, work, and to be here together on this territory. Crewing up and breaking through, the session you are at is part of the Foundations program, which is in its sophomore year here at the conference. And I couldn't be more thrilled that we are having this discussion right now at this moment in time. I want to remind you that there's no photography or video recording in the studio during the session. We have a photographer taking photos, and this is actually live streamed right now. So hello to everyone at home who is watching. Please share it, please comment. We'd love to hear what you have to say as well. And anyone in the room, if you want to get involved in a conversation beyond this room, please use the hashtag TIFF18 to keep the conversation going, because it is such an important conversation. And what a better way to start our day than to confront our biases and wake ourselves up to some other points of view and to how we can provide access for more people in our industry. There's obviously been a much needed paradigm shift on what we're seeing on our screens. We see that in big examples like Black Panther and Crazy Rich Asians. But it's also so important for us to consider who is working behind the scenes. Who are we giving access to? What are barriers to access that we actually haven't even considered yet? And what is the global impact of having diversity and inclusion and initiatives for people behind the scenes, and how does that lead to what we see on our screens? So these are some of the wonderful things that are going to be talked about today with our incredibly stacked panel. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them before they come out. On our panel today, we start with April Rain, who's the creator of the viral hashtag #OscarsSoWhite, which challenged the lack of representation of marginalized communities in Hollywood. The movement resulted in the most systemic change ever seen in Academy history. And since then, she has worked with her over 125,000 social media followers to create a dialogue, explored the issues of race, diversity, and representation with them. Joining April is Sean Finney, who currently holds the title of Artistic Director, Member Relations at the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences. He works alongside Lorenza Munoz, Managing Director, Membership Relations and Awards, to strategically engage the membership and create initiatives for the members year-round. So it's going to be great to have both of them on the stage to talk about that issue. We also have the wonderful Tema Steg, who is the Executive Director of Women in Media, an NPO that encourages parity and inclusion in the entertainment industries above and below the line. She's best known in the art department on Kissing Jessica Stein, American Splendor, and Battlefield America. They are joined by Patricia Gomez, who is the festival director of the LA Skins Fest, which is a Native American film festival that takes place in Hollywood, now entering its 12th year. She established the Native Youth Multimedia Workshop, which is a multimedia program that teaches Native youth how to produce, direct, and edit their own films. This program has partnered with Indigenous youth from tribes in Oklahoma, Arizona, New Mexico, California, and Morocco. And the conversation is going to be led by Leah Marin, who is the producer of English programming at the National Film Board. She's produced many films, and she recently completed production on the feature doc, What is Democracy?, premiering here at the festival. So you are in for an insightful, invigorating conversation, and you are going to be very much a part of that conversation. And I really just can't wait. So without further ado, I would love to welcome to the stage our guests, Leah Marin, Sean Finney, Tema Steg, Patricia Gomez, and April Rain. Give them a warm round of applause.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm impressed with how many people are in the theater right now because it is crazy out there this morning.
It is early and wet. So thank you. We will say thank you to each individual person after.
So very excited to be on the stage with everyone here this morning. And as we were talking in the back, this is really about it being a conversation. So we want to open it up to Q&A throughout, not just at the end, because I think the perspectives of those in the audience is also just as important. And the first question I have, or the first point I'd like to start off with is, you know, we will, if you can talk about the initiatives that all of you have been working on, the tools you've created, and what you've been trying to do within the industry. But if you could take a step back and actually begin by looking at it from a personal perspective. So I'd really like to know where things began for you personally in your own careers, and maybe take us up to the point where you realized something needed to be done that has driven you to now have created these initiatives within the industry. So maybe let's start with you, April.
Yeah, 14-part question. Up until 2015, I was a practicing attorney, not in the entertainment field at all, and it was very slowly killing my soul. And I was on social media all the time as a hobby, as an avocation, and I had gotten involved in some online protests/movements before. You may remember in 2014, Trayvon Martin's killer, whose name I don't use, was considering fighting the rapper DMX in what was going to be a charity bout. And I thought that was wrong for about 47 different reasons, and so I created the hashtag Stop the Fight, and over about 10 days, you know, had to talk with the actual promoter, and that was it. And he, in fact, stopped the fight. In January of 2015, I was in my family room watching the Oscar nominations, as I did every year. The Oscars were like my Super Bowl. So I pre-gamed, there were snacks involved, roped off the TV to ensure the kids knew today was Mommy's Day. You know, so, and I'm downstairs half dressed in my family room because that particular year, January 2015, Chris Hemsworth, Thor, from the Avengers series, was one of the presenters. And I said, I need Thor in a suit, in HD, on the biggest TV screen that we have in the house. So this was not the first year that it had happened, unfortunately, but I realized as he was going through category after category, you know, like they say in Do the Right Thing, weren't no brothers up on the wall. And so I took to my phone, which is never far, and just said, Oscars so white, they asked to touch my hair. Yeah. That was it. Yeah. I finished getting dressed and went on to work. I checked in at lunchtime, and the hashtag based on that one tweet was trending internationally. And so then I had to very quickly figure out, well, how white are they? Turns out, snow white. And then it started out as a joke. You know, I was being snarky, and so everybody, you know, Oscars so white, they wear Birkenstocks in the wintertime. Oscars so white, they've got a perfect credit score. You get it. And so it wasn't until a couple of days later that the conversation changed into something more serious. And so now here we are 3 years later, going from a moment to a movement, and still talking about the issues of diversity and inclusion and equity. And at the time, I was just thinking Oscars, but I'm very thankful that people are now talking about the entire entertainment industry, and in fact, other industries, right? There's also a journalism so white that I didn't start, and so on. So that was 2015. I said, I've talked enough about the problem, let's talk about the solution. So what I'm now working on is garnering funding for Aquarel, which is a online networking database for folks above and beyond the line, in front of and behind the curtain, in front of and behind the camera. So I'm talking everything from A-list actresses to key grips and boom operators and craft services, so that studios and networks can no longer say, well, we get it, we want to work with marginalized communities, we just can't find them. Exactly. Because we know that they're there. We know that, I think talent is not based on geography, so you shouldn't have to live in New York or LA or be able to afford an agent to put your stuff out there. And then so studios and networks can literally check off boxes. I'm looking for, you know, a 25-year-old Asian American Pacific Islander woman who's done voiceover work for Moana 2. Check, 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 check. Yeah. And then you get a list.
Wow. And is solely in the U.S. or is it international?
It is currently just in the U.S., yes. Okay. But if somebody here wants to talk about expanding, we can absolutely have that conversation.
Okay, move it out. I mean, I think let's move into you then, Sean, because I think there's a connection, right? Of course, moving between
connection.
April and what you're working on. So maybe let's move into the Oscar realm now.
Oh, here we are. First of all, hi everyone. Good morning. Thank you for coming out in the rain. Make some noise for TIFF for having us. Some noise for yourself. I want to start by saying April and I actually love each other. So I don't want anyone to be like, why are they sitting next to each other?
No.
Yeah.
No, April is such a big part of what has happened in the industry. And I think like you said, it snowballed into the world because you didn't do it just for the Oscars. I started out at the Academy probably about almost 6 years ago, and I came from more of the music space. Mm-hmm. I was in LA, and I don't know what you heard about LA about being all about dreams, but it gets very difficult. I started living in my car and was like, I need to get a job. How is this going to work? What's going to happen for me? I'm a creative by nature. And I was trying to figure out, okay, where's my life going? Ended up working as a temp assistant to the CEO. And from that point on, I think there's a certain conversation that we don't have about opportunity. There's an opportunity, there's the question of creating opportunity, and there's a question of being prepared for opportunity. Mm-hmm. And I think being prepared for opportunity leaves you at a space where you're having to wait for something to happen. I'm a creator, so I'm like, no, we need to make this work. We need to do something. So I was her temp assistant for a while, and after I became the full-time assistant, I was there for a little bit. And one day, when our nominations were coming around, there was this hashtag that was going around and spinning out of control, and it was Oscars So White, and it was something so obviously personal to me because I don't see many people in the business that look like me. Yeah. When I walk into rooms, I don't see myself, and to me that's always been so weird because I've grown up on military bases with so many different nationalities and people that I never was in the room by myself, so I didn't understand that feeling, and I'm sure everyone here can understand that feeling. And I was like, there needs to be an intersection between the boardroom, going from the studios, dealing with the talent, someone who's kind of navigating and pushing through. And so I went home, created my own position, came back to work. This is what I was talking about creating opportunity, because I could have waited, but they wouldn't have picked me. But because I had the trust of the CEO, because I serve, we don't talk a lot about service. Everything we do is service. Mm-hmm. And because I was interested in figuring out how can I help this conversation, how can I add value to this conversation instead of just complaining about it. So I went home, created the opportunity and the position for myself of head of membership outreach. Did that for a little while to kind of personally take on this issue that we're having, because it's not about, what I love about what April did, sorry I'm jumping around, what I love about what April did is that it allowed for a conversation that needed to happen for so long and an opportunity to educate, right? Because a lot of people don't understand how Oscars became so white. And it's not the studio's problem in specific, but it's who's casting, who's producing, who's greenlighting. There's a whole process. By the time it gets to us, it's went through all the festivals. Right. It's went through every possible scenario, and then they're just there voting, you know what I mean? Which doesn't alleviate us from the conversation. But I was like, we have to really look at the membership. And the first year was over 600 plus members. It was the most diverse class at that time. Then it was 774, and then this past year, not sure if you guys heard, but it's been over 900, which is the most diverse class ever for the Academy of Motion Pictures. Yeah. So thanks to April Rain. The conversation, it started to be in action, and the Academy was very much about, this needs to work now. This needs to happen now. We need to have these different voices at the table. And I don't think that it was a personal thing to not have it there before. I just think as you're living sometimes, you're not aware that you're not cognizant of the world around you.
Bias, right?
Yeah, exactly. And what I love about the Academy is there's the thing about diversity on the outside, but there's a thing about diversity on the inside. And Spike Lee so very well said it when he won his governor's award. He's like, I want to see black people not be your security guards. I want to see black people in the rooms. And the Academy has allowed me the opportunity to be here to create a position. So for that alone, I'm very humbled, and I'm very passionate about making sure that we are all represented, regardless of skin color, regardless of sexual orientation, and just opening the minds and expanding for the industry and the world at large. That's my bit.
Tema?
Well, I was asked to help with an event at a college where I was teaching for our Women in Film group, and I had never really been that involved in that, because they would get up and they would kind of talk at you, and you'd sit in rows, and that wasn't really my bag. I'm more of a conversational kind of person. So they asked for help, and I'm one of those people, I just jump in and I say, okay, I'll help. And it was an event where we were honoring 5 of the young women at the school because we felt that they were going to go on to do really great things. We could tell because they had worked so hard and done such great work in school. So at this event, I'm standing behind one of our other students, this rather big guy, and he's talking to one of the honorees, and he says, oh, you're getting an award for having a vagina? And I go, ooh, wow, apparently our women really do need some help at the school, which I knew anyway, I just didn't know to what degree. So I jumped into this group. The other faculty left at that point, and I changed the format a bit, where it was more about networking. It was more about getting to know other women who can help you, and who can create like a bond and a friendship, and also help each other in their work. So fast forward, I took it outside of the school, because there was clearly more of a need outside. And the more I talked to people, the more they focused on above the line. They only talked about, oh, we need more women directors, writers, producers, and it'll filter down. And in 40 years, since the original 6, it has not filtered down. So I felt that we need to crush from the top down and the bottom up. And I created Women in Media the way it is now. Fast forward to the Women's March. A friend of mine who actually has a film here, Tom Donahue, has the wonderful Gina Davis film here. He's the director, right?
Yeah.
So just prior to that, there was a little bit of backlash about that film because Gina Davis is making a film about women directors, and it's directed by a man, and people were all up in arms about it. So I contacted him, and it turned out he was lovely, and there were other women making the same film, so I thought, well, why not? And I said to him, you know, there's not much we can do about your gender. And you seem wonderful. But what about the people in your crew? I said, who's your DP? He's, well, I do have a guy. I said, okay, well, I get you want to be loyal to your crew, but when he's busy, would you be adverse to hiring women in your crew? I was like, oh, what a great idea. So I started like filtering crew to him when he would occasionally ask me. So during the Women's March, he asks me if I can help him find some DPs around the country, and I would introduce him to some people. And I was wrapping up my own project for the Women's March LA. We were doing a video that was playing on the side of the bus the whole day. So I'm a lunatic trying to finish my project, but I can't let my buddy down. Right? Because I'm the Women in Media person. I've been collecting contact sheets for years from our events of women above and below the line. And so I thought, well, what if I make a Google Doc and then Tom can just go to that and people can fill out their own information and I don't have to be the middle person. Yeah. So it blew up. It became 2,000 women in 26 departments like that. Wow. Yeah. But it turns out Google Docs aren't that stable. So I decided to go 501c3 and create a proper list. So you can actually go on a website now to womenandmedia.com, look on the crew list, and you can search by department, country, last name, and up will come a whole bunch of ladies in that department. So you can find women in camera crew, grips, electrics, art department, directors, writers, and you click on their profile and a bunch of information will come up about them, their professional information, and they put that on themselves. So it'll have their IMDb, their resume, a reel if they want, their SoundCloud if they're in music, any awards, all that great professional information. Because for years we've been told there are no women. What women? I don't see any women, right? You know, there are no women DPs. And I heard this from men and women. We just don't know them. And I thought, well, what if we just take the excuse away? So that crew list has worked. And then we also do something called Hire These Women Lunches, where we put keys in a position to hire to lunch with women who they should be hiring. So they get to know them socially, and then everybody signs in, and they put their their women in media links for their profiles into the sheet, and then I email that to the people in a position to hire, and they do, which is amazing.
It's incredible.
Yeah, Alan Queso, who was at one of our, two of our events, has hired a bunch of women in his department. He's just knocking it out of the park. He's hired for his Steadicam, his camera operator, his second unit, a bunch of other departments. So it's working.
That's awesome. That's great. Thanks, Emma. Thank you. Trisha.
Oh, let's see. Where did I start? Well, I began by I started producing films with Native American tribes in California. I began by producing a documentary that basically talked about a reservation in Riverside, and they only have 7 members. And usually, like a reservation, when it's composed with Native American tribal members, is a little bit large, but this reservation only has 7 members. So when I began working with them, and I started producing a film, and I thought it was important to make a film about that community because really no one knows about it. So I worked with their last elder who was fluent in the Mount Kuia language, and she was able to discuss what the language meant to the reservation and how important it was to revitalize it, because once she passed, then the language basically goes to sleep unless somebody else picks it up and continues on with the language. So that's how I began my career. And in 2007, I started working with the LA Skins Fest. That's when we initiated the film festival. We believed that it was really important to create a space for Native Americans to screen their work in Los Angeles, because there's no Native American film festivals in Los Angeles. It was important to create that space. And also because there's also a lot of Native Americans in LA who are producing media, and we felt that it was important just, to be part of the festival. So the festival started in 2007, and the festival started growing every year. So we were getting filmmakers from around the United States and Canada, and we started growing the festival by increasing the dates and partnering up with studios and networks, and they were able to provide us with some of the theaters, and we were able to, again, provide the space. So in 2009, when I was going to the University of Southern California, I thought it was really important for Native youth to create their own content, and I started working with a Native American nonprofit in downtown Los Angeles, and I started working with their youth, and we recruited them and brought them over to USC, and we taught them how to produce and how to direct and how to edit their own films. They produced 3 films, and they were really into it, and we screened them at the film festival. So when I saw that they wanted to make films, I decided to reach out to Native American tribes across the United States. The following year, then I started working with tribes in Oklahoma and Arizona, and we basically started building that partnership with reservations and their youth. So since 2009, we basically have been traveling to reservations and working with their youth. This year has been really crazy because we have been working with 6 Native American tribes. We basically worked with the tribe in Washington, and we partnered with Paramount Studios, and we were able to buy some equipment for the school that we were partnering with, and we got them the equipment and we taught them how to use it, and now they're initiating their own film program, and they're supposed to be making films throughout the year. So we are trying to sort of go in there and trying to get the community to buy the equipment and learn how to use it, and encourage the youth to continue to produce the media once we leave. So we are building those partnerships, and we think it's really important. As for other initiatives, we also have a Native American TV Writers Lab, where we take in 7 Native American writers, and we teach them how to write a pilot. So what that entails is basically they bring in 3 ideas, they pitch 3 ideas to the group, and we select the best idea, and they go ahead and write about it. Well, one of the things that's important about that program is that we're trying to encourage them to build their portfolio and to become writers, because like we mentioned here, that opportunity is not available for Native Americans, especially in the United States, so we're trying to open that door. Our program has been successful, that one of our participants got into the NBC Writers Program and also the ABC Writers Program, which is a huge thing. So we're kind of opening that pipeline. Because of the success of our program, we were able to initiate a features writers lab where we are taking in 5 Native American writers, and they're able to write a feature film. Right now, the program is taking place, so it's going on in LA. And that's a lot of fun.
Great.
So what else is going on? And currently, we're also traveling to California and working with some Native youth in Arcata. So our programs are pretty busy. We're trying to tap into different ideas and trying to encourage Native Americans to continue to produce content and to be behind and in front of the camera, because those opportunities are not available for them.
Well, I think that's part of it. So we all touched on this a little bit. There's access, there's opportunity, those are the things that are missing. But then there's also the issue of experience and education, right? Yeah. Because I think a lot of people that are then put into streams and are put into databases, the counter to that is often, well, you don't really have a lot of experience, which becomes the rationale for why they then don't get the opportunity. So maybe I think particularly with Tema and Patricia, talk a little bit about the education aspect of what we're doing as well, because I think there's one thing to create the pool of talent, but it's another thing to recognize that there's also there's more to be done in terms of the mentorship, the education, because I think that there hasn't been the access, which allows for the opportunity, which builds the experience, right?
So I can speak to that.
Yeah.
So women get shadowing and training programs, and men get a job, basically, right? Do we have any mentoring programs for white men? Are there any shadowing programs for white men? No. We have wayward cousin Vinny, who wants to be a grip, and uncle says, hey, wayward cousin Vinny, come, I'm going to put you on the truck, and you don't know what you're doing, and I'm just going to teach you. That's what happens. Yeah. So we're creating wayward cousin Vanessas. And we're making those introductions, which doesn't mean that you don't need training. Of course you do. And of course, things change every 6 months. We have some new training you need to learn. So we do give that kind of access as well. And sometimes in a lot of ways, I'm kind of testing people. So we had this wonderful training session at Jail Fisher Dolly, where we had about 25 women and 2 guys doing Dolly class. And there were these 2 women. Frank would say, who wants to try that? I do. And I thought, oh, these 2 girls are hot. I'm going to put them on. So I made an introduction to this legendary woman grip, and they then had that introduction. Like, I saw them, I could vouch for them, right? And I introduced them to this woman who could then make an introduction to somebody else. And that's how you do it, And clearly you want to make sure that you're introducing somebody who isn't not in the right position to do something, but by the same token, we have to just believe in women's excellence and that they're going to rise to the occasion. And that's a big part of the problem. And I know with my own career, and I hear this from women all the time, we're doing great, doing great, doing great. We get to a certain point, and then we get dumped. People don't want to believe that we have a certain level of excellence and that we can do it. And that's when you get to a stage where there should be money, where we should be breaking the glass ceiling. Because women are making content. We're doing it in every position, above and below the line. It's just at the indie level, the low budget indie level. It's getting into the studios. It's getting into the bigger budget indies. That's where people fail us. And you're losing out on talent. When you don't believe in female talent, the audience loses and the industry loses. And of course, the women lose as well. We lose in our careers, we lose in our ability to support ourselves and our families, and a lot of women drop out because the industry becomes a place that's very hostile, and on so many levels, right? And we need an industry that will be welcoming to everybody and actually make it based on talent, not based on gender. And that's when you're going to see more women, is when you actually base it on talent and gumption, determination, and just the willingness to work twice as hard, because right now, we work twice as hard to get half the respect. And that's a fact. That's in every sector. And when people realize that, and they actually look at our excellence, we'll have a much happier, healthier industry.
Yeah, agreed.
Yes.
I mean, we've been making jokes about the fact that I think women and people of color and Indigenous people for years have been given emerging programs. They're in lots of emerging programs over and over again, but there isn't that push when they move to the next level to continue to support them as they move up.
Exactly. And if it doesn't land in a job or an interview or some sort of pitch, I wouldn't say that the shadowing has been useless, but I will say that it wasn't that useful. And you see women who have done 60 hours of television shadowing, when there should be people shadowing them. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Can we talk a bit about then the change that we're seeing in this industry and perhaps in other industries, as April was referring to off the top? But so maybe Sean, can you talk about this new membership? You're now 900 new members that have been inducted, that have been brought in. What's the change that you're seeing, and how do you hope that will influence the industry?
Well, I think a few different things. I think anytime you bring different voices to the room, you're allowing for different conversations to happen, number one. And I feel like that's part of the whole thing, bringing people in and going and figuring out what engagement is. I think for so long, the Academy has been around and has went through generations of time. And I think that engagement is something we're all engaging now in so many different ways, whether it's online, on Twitter, social media, and it's about figuring out how we can continue to engage with the members who've been in before, the new members who are coming in, and the future that we're hoping to connect with and inspire with, which is probably a lot of people in this audience. Yeah. And figuring out, once the 900 plus new members come in, you have different voices. It's the most international as well. So then now it's creating initiatives and programs where they are. So bringing the Academy to where they are, and so that everyone gets to experience, because for a lot of people, they're like, it's the show, right? You put on a nice dress or a suit, you get the envelope right, and you know what I mean? And you have a show, and it's pretty, and it's all fun, but there's a lot of different initiatives throughout the year. Even speaking to what you were talking about with creating the programs, like we have the Gold Program, and the Gold Program is an initiative that fosters interns and places them strategically in different sectors of the entertainment industry and creates a program along the way that allows to track them and where they are and connecting them with the members as mentors. And I think that a lot of the times, growing up as a young black man, I didn't know about being a grip. I knew about gripping other things, but I didn't know about being,
Yeah. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. No, but I didn't know about being a grip. There's an education process that has to happen. I didn't know that I could be a screenwriter. I didn't know I could be an executive. But this is what an executive looks like to me. And so about figuring out how to mirror that and create that and spark that change within yourself, but also you have to see it. Like you're talking about with women and with everybody in this audience, you have to see yourself, and then you have to be willing to go there. One of the things I wanted to piggyback and say about you when we're talking about going after your dreams or creating change, it's never easy. I think that's a misconception. It's probably the hardest thing you'll do in your life, stepping out on your own, wanting and having the ability. How many people in here have dreams? How many people know how hard it is to achieve those dreams? Exactly my point. You know what I mean? So there's this false misconception that we have, if you're going after your dreams, it's going to be easy. It's not, but that doesn't mean that it's not for you. That doesn't mean that that's not the path you're supposed to take. It's not no forever. It's no, not right now. And one of the things that you said is, I think there's 3 things that we have to continue to do. 1, serve. Serve, serve, serve. Find ways how you can add value, how you can create your content, but how your content is impactful for the world, not just yourself. Number 2, to continue to do it every day, to decide to get up and do it every day, to decide when it's hard to get up, to decide when you're sleeping in your 1998 Toyota Camry to keep going, you know what I mean? And going back to what you said, number 3, finding your community. Your community. And your community is not based on gender, but finding the tentacles that speak to where you are and being able to connect with them and engage with them, because there's this other misconception that's like, I'm not gonna talk to the assistant, I'm gonna talk to the CEO, and you've already messed up. You know what I mean? Because the assistant, who knows where they're going to be and who they're going to be. I started off as an assistant sleeping in my car. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so we have to remove the titles, like we have to remove the gender. We have to remove these ideas that you have to be in a high position, because as we all know, the higher the position, sometimes you don't have the landscape of really understanding what's happening. So finding your tribe, deciding to continue to do it every day and do it when it's hard, and being able to just continue every day to show up as yourself and push forward. Sorry, that was
if I can add on just one more thing is, make sure that you are networking laterally,
Yes.
horizontally, in addition to just vertically. Like everybody's like, oh, well, if I can't meet the CEO or the person that has several letters after their last name, I'm not interested in it. And you need to, remember who you are, where you are, and understand that sometimes the folks who are right there struggling with you on your level or just slightly above are the ones that can really give you the hookups and to put you on to get you into those boardrooms. You know, I think sometimes we want the stars immediately, and we don't think about what's going on in the atmosphere around us. So ensure that you are networking laterally. You're working with folks right there where you are, because it also creates, it allows you to find your tribe, right?
Yes.
And so you can have those conversations. Hey, you know, I used to do a lot of freelance writing, and part of it was just not even knowing how much to ask for. You know, it's like, oh, I'm going to write for this amazing publication. What does that look like? Am I charging per word? Am I charging for the entire article? Who do I know to talk to, right? And so an editor is not going to give you that answer, but fellow journalists are going to say, oh, I charge for this, or don't even work for them because they're not going to pay, hello. Or, you know, or other folks, you know, and you know, we have to remember that sometimes we have to be still, you know, as we're moving forward, but be still and realize that there are still things right here that you can make your own.
I think you're right. I mean, we talk a lot about the gatekeepers, and Sean, you alluded to that in the beginning as well, and we can get to that, but I do think something I've been thinking about as well is how do you then amass a collective and build that community, because that's so important to the change as well. And I think maybe we could speak to that a little bit in terms of how do we create change beyond the need to just change the gatekeepers? And you know, you've already started with that, April. Anything else that you want to add, Patricia?
Well, I think, you know, because I've been working with you for a long time, I think it's important to, like, put that seed in there, like, really young, and open that opportunity, because a lot of the kids that we're working with are, like, middle school, high school, and basically they are, you know, if they're going to college, then we want to be able to open that door and say, hey, why don't you go ahead and go into film school or go into journalism? So then we're able to, like, our organization is able to partner with universities, and we take the Native youth to those field trips, and then we basically give them a tour of the facility and talk about the internships and the fellowships that they have available. Because a lot of the things that we have been encountering through our journey is that a lot of the Native youth are scared to go to college because they can't afford it. And we want to just go ahead and just say that is not true. There is opportunity there. There is funding available. And why don't you go ahead and just apply and try. We will go ahead and guide you through the whole process. We'll look at your application, we'll connect you with counselors, and we'll help you. And I think that once we have them go through that pipeline and ultimately they continue to produce media if they enter college, then we're able to create that, expand, you know, those opportunities. So I guess one of the things that our community, the Native American community, is that the way we see life is that we have to see 7 generations ahead. And we believe that if we start from now, then those kids are going to open the doors for 7 generations ahead of them. So I guess this is important.
So have your kids come and talk to me, because I teach at LA City College, where we have the LA College Promise, and they can apply for Hollywood CPR, which is, they learn this amazing craft, right, from the experts. And by the time they're done, if they've really pulled through this very, very rigorous program, it's practically free too. I mean, it's not exactly free, but it's very inexpensive. By the time they pull through this program, they get into the union. And then they're like on their way. But in terms of what Women in Media does, we have been proactive in that we have lots of events for networking, above and below the line. Because if you're in a bubble, if it's just producers or just directors don't tend to hire other directors unless they're also producing. So we have people who can hire people in a position to be hired, and we all get together, and we have people sign in their name, their contact information, what they do, and any wants, needs, or offers. And then we have people get up, and you have 40 seconds. You get to say who you are, what you do, any wants, needs, or offers. So I might get up and say, hi, my name is Tema Steg, I'm a production designer, and I'm looking for commercials and music videos. Done, I'm out. And then we use that contact sheet. I email it to everybody who signed in, and I recommend that they meet up with 3 or 4 people over lunch or coffee and just get to know each other. You don't have to have an agenda. If you do, that's great, but you don't have to. And so many people have made, I mean, at the worst, you're gonna make friends, right? And at the best, you're gonna make colleagues. And what's so great is the energy at the events it's so high. Everybody is so nice and so happy, because it's like, oh, you're an editor, fantastic, I needed an editor. And they're working together, and they're becoming friends. And that's how you build your social network, because our industry is very social. As much as it is about how good you are at your job, it's really about who knows you. So we're expanding those social circles. And what I found is that people, dare I say it, some of our friends at the Academy, they're not so likely to say, watch your movie. I'm not going to tell you who, but trust me. They won't watch your movie unless they know you sometimes. And
Or vote for it.
Huh?
They won't
or
vote
for it.
sometimes.
And to speak to what happened during when Selma was up, something that made me very angry. I was talking to a friend of mine from the Academy, who a voting member, and I was like, "Hey, this really great movie just came out, Selma. It looks amazing. Have you seen it yet?" And he was like, "Oh, no, I'm not gonna watch it." And I was like, "Why?" He said, "Well, for one, I don't know her. For 2, I don't know her body of work. She doesn't have a body of work." I'm like, hold on. No, I'm pretty sure she won something at Sundance, maybe. And
Ava is a body of work.
she is.
Let's just make that very clear.
She's done a couple things, right? So, but this was when Selma came out, and he also said, "Oh well," and I heard it's a made-for-TV movie, which is like the evil thing to say if you're an old school film person, and that really made me pause. There was also the year that Belle came out, and I asked him if he had seen that, and he hadn't. I was just horrified. So it occurred to me that it's really very much about your social circle. So if only at the time he was friends with Ava, they had cocktails together or beer, whatever, he probably would have watched her movie. But he didn't know her yet.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, please.
Going back to, I want to know who that is.
is
No, I'm kidding. But going,
Which one?
Yeah. Going back to kind of when you asked about like the importance and why it's important for the membership class to be the biggest and the most diverse and the most international is for reasons like this.
Yeah.
It's for being able to have different voices around the room that understand those specifics and who can say, I know Ava, and this is why it's important. And even just the voting in process of the membership is very interesting, because there's different committees that are broken up, and these different committees sit around the room kind of like we are. And imagine us right now, the names we would have just from our personal experiences, from where we're from and who we know. And just from that, now you take that same into voting, which is kind of like what you're saying. And then different voices are saying, oh my God, you have to go see such and such, or you have to do this. And then that allows for Oscars to be not so white.
That's right.
And I think, Leah, to your point, I mean, watching the diversity increase within the Academy has been fantastic for me. I love being the outside agitator, right? I don't need to be in those rooms. But knowing that there are people like Sean and so many others that are now in those rooms, I think we're seeing the change. You know, the fact that we had Daniela Vega grace the stage at the Oscars. Now, you know, we can continue to have this conversation about firsts. You know, why is it in 2018 we had the first trans actress on a stage ever? And she wasn't even, you know, presenting, you know, she was just kind of there. So where are we going next year? And so I also think that when decisions are made about what gets nominated and what gets seen, you know, one of the trade mags does every year, they talk to an anonymous voter, you know, and it incenses me to hear people say, oh, well, I couldn't pronounce Lupita's name, so I didn't see her film, you know, 12 Years a Slave. Or I just thought it was time for him to win, and so I voted for him. Or I just saw an ad in Variety, and so it was fresh in my mind, as opposed to voting on the merit, right? So Oscars So White was never about affirmative action or quotas or anything but what we know is that you're not required at this point to watch the films. And so if you're not watching, how are you voting and on what basis, right? And then it just becomes a popularity contest based on who you know. That's so right. Of course Spielberg and Clint Eastwood are, you know, and these names that everybody knows for decades are going to get the nominations. Not to say that they're not qualified, right? Not to say that they didn't have the best work of the year, but who else is out there, and why are you in this silo that doesn't open you up to other opportunities?
I think that's exactly it. I feel like, and so things are a bit different in Canada. We have a lot of institutions in this country that also fund in the media industry. And so, you know, in recent years, including at the National Film Board of Canada, we have introduced commitments, right? So 15% of our dollars are invested in Indigenous productions. Mm-hmm. And we have actually, in the area of gender parity, have committed to 50% of the dollars going to female directors by 2020. I think we're actually at 48% now. We're very, very close. And then we realized as well, the craft and below the line categories, we just were not up to par. I think we were at something like 12 to 20% of women in any of the craft categories, so we're working toward that as well. Telefilm has similar, I think, commitments as well. So this is what's happening in this country right now. But I think what we're speaking to, and maybe we can talk about the independent community a little bit, because that's where the struggle is, right? How do you enroll people in the independent community, producers, funders, people that will invest in your content, to actually come on board? And I think it's what you're speaking to, is that you need more people in the room from diverse backgrounds to be able to push, to be able to confront, to be able to have those conversations, right? Excuse me. Any questions? Sorry, I said we would open it up, and I think we're kind of close down to 15 minutes now, so yes, right here.
Thank you. I am in my last year of grad school at Howard University, and I actually did the Academy Gold program, graduated this summer, and they hired me out of the intern class to be an assistant. So I really thank you for that program. Bettina Fisher runs and she's amazing. So thank you for that. Like it matters. So
that's cool.
It does. So right now I work in data analytics and media metrics at UTA. And I actually want to talk about that aspect of it, because we have the reports and we're getting more data than ever before about the numbers and engagement and how the numbers measure in terms of diversity within the industry. And I want to know how we're using that kind of information and that content as leverage for trying to include more people from diverse backgrounds in these positions. And also I want you to speak, if you can, I know we're talking about below the line and things of that nature, but also about executives, because one of the things, Taraj P. Henson, alum, Howard, basically she was saying we need more executives in the room, and I really aspire to be an executive, and also executive in leadership positions, because one thing, I look around and I see a lot of assistants and coordinators, but then when I look for leadership positions or a studio head or something of that nature, it's like, do I see a black woman? Not so much. So if you could speak to that, just data and executives, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Can I jump on the assistant part real quick?
Yes.
Just because that was me specifically.
Okay.
I still don't see me in the room very often. So when I show up as the real me and not the me that I'm supposed to be. I think that's number one. But I think it's number two, using that assistant opportunity to serve and build trust with whoever it is that you are working with, and promoting yourself. And when I say that, I don't mean everybody in here can't go into the room and say, this is my job description, make that happen. You know what I'm saying? But when you show up and you show that you're that thoughtful, that intentional about where you are, whether it's UTA or whatever company that you're with, about impacting change, you care that much about your investment within yourself and the value that you have to bring, that's just a good practice to have. And I'm not saying that everybody's gonna walk in there and be able to do that, but at least they know, oh, this is where you are. This is how you see yourself. Being an assistant, you would be an assistant forever if you see yourself as an assistant. I didn't see I was like, girl, I can't make your tea and your coffee. I can't, you know what I'm saying? Like, I have much more to offer and much more to give, and figuring out what your strengths are and creating that for yourself. When I say promoting yourself, you just start operating from that space before the world sees it, because that's how it works for everyone, for every actress, for every singer. Gaga had to see it in herself first before everybody else believed it. Then she went through, and then they told, my bad, y'all. But then
So busy, booked and busy.
and then they told her, you know, that she was not going to be able to do it, and they're still telling her she can't do it. So from the assistant space, I can't really, the data and analytics, I'm going to let them handle that. But from the assistant space, I think you have to really promote yourself in your spirit. You do that for you. Yeah.
I can just touch on data and analytics just for a second. I just think it's so, the more data that we have, the more information that we have, the more folks say, you know, the emperor's wearing no clothes, it makes it easier for those who are inside making change. So USC Annenberg and the Inclusionists are doing amazing work. Shout out to Fanch and Giovanni Cox, because they're saying things that people know, but sometimes you need to yell it. And that's why having Frances McDormand say inclusion writer on stage at the Oscars, like that was the big talk, right? After part one of the big talks. Afterward, right? And there are studios who are saying, oh, well, we already do that, right? We are already being very intentional with who we hire in front of and behind the camera. But knowing that there are folks out there who can say, look at the numbers, look how paltry they are, and then look at the opportunities, look at the resources that are available to make those changes. When you can marry those two, I think that's where we see substantive and systemic change.
Hi. First of all, thank you all for such an awesome panel. I'm a film student and a filmmaker at York, and I think this is more of a reflection rather than a question, and it's for you, April. Your hashtag just was incredible for me because a couple of years ago, I had my first job in a very small town, a little outside of Toronto, producing a few community television shows on immigration. And I was literally the only woman of color in an office of all white folks, 50-something-year-old small town folks. And I was pretty much the token brown girl. And it was a subject on immigration. So your hashtag inspired me and gave me an outlet to start snapping about it. So Snapchat, I used that as an outlet, and my hashtag was #OfficeSoWhite. So I frequently talked about all the microaggressions, the Islamophobia, the racism, all of that. And the really sad part is that I had absolutely no autonomy over what happened on the sets of these shows. Literally was just there as that token brown girl. So I guess I have a little bit of a question. It's more so I've had this fear of ever really talking about what happened because it was 2 years of hell. And you know, you're constantly told, just, you know, shut up about it, don't say anything, you're gonna get blacklisted, just keep going, you know, like how do we, it's very conflicting, because what do you do with that? Do you actually go forth and talk about your story and risk even making it up that ladder? You know, or use hashtags like that to educate folks. I mean, I had a lot of great feedback from my very humble following. But what do you do, especially as a woman of color in this industry? Because you get, like, shit on constantly. And there's really, it's like you really want to fight back, you really want to do something, but it's very defeating.
Yeah, and I thank you for your story. Thank you for sharing that with us. I operate from a position of privilege because I'm not in the industry, right? So I can say whatever the hell I want to because I'm not trying to get a job, right? And so I understand that you are in a very precarious position and you have to make those choices for yourself from time to time, you know, and hopefully you will find that you will find your tribe, that there are others out there who definitely feel the way you do, and there's obviously strength in numbers. What I want to pivot to for just a second is for the people who are not as marginalized in the room, talking to you white folks, and talking to you men. It's imperative. I want to talk to you for 30 seconds about the difference between allies and advocates, right? Everybody wants to say that they're an ally. Everybody wants to have the little safety pin on their shirt or their, you know, and want to get the gold star. But when you have a woman of color, when you have someone who has less privilege than you, and I'm talking whether it's Indigenous people, whether it's disabled folks, whether it's LGBT plus folks, whether it's women, whether it's race, whatever that marginalization is, if you are not there, it is your responsibility to stand up for those folks. It is your responsibility to say, you know what? I've heard from 8 different white men around the room. I'd love to hear some different perspectives. Just saying that will open up the room to those folks who have something to say but don't know how. So don't just be an ally, right? Don't self-identify. If you're self-identifying as an ally, you're not doing the work. You want the gold star and the cookie. Be the advocate, push, stand in the gap for those who are more marginalized than you to make it a little bit easier for them to walk on through.
Yep.
Could I say something real quick? Leah, could I say something really quick?
Go ahead, Sean.
Actually, April had said something. We were on a podcast before called It's the Session, hosted by Michelle Nicole, and we were talking about, I was like, April, what can we as men do to really help out? And, you know, all this. And she said two words that really, and I don't even know if you know what you said, but she was like, listen and amplify. And just allow that to sit in. And like when you're talking about that privilege, and when you're talking about just listen and then amplify. And you said that, and I thank you for that, because that was just so powerful.
Awesome. I think we have a question over here.
Hi. Hi. Sorry, my voice is a little raspy. It's TIFF. My name is Sarah Thomas Moffat. I'm a director of photography, and thanks for putting up this crew talk. If I can just add to the conversation, as a woman in crew who's been in the industry out of Toronto for about 25 years since college, things that we need are access, opportunity, and visibility, as you all know. One thing that I do to advocate is run a support group for women in crew to avert isolation and focus on mental health, because what happens, as you know, and anybody else listening in the room, we go into dark places when we suffer from isolation and loneliness, and it's because we're human like any other living species. We are not meant to be alone. So let's pull together and, you know, use ourselves to hire each other. And one of the points I wanted to make was, you know, as well as focusing on mental health, things that need to happen from the top, like you already touched on, need to happen on, I guess what I'm getting at is no judgment, you know? I mean, people still judge each other. So it's like, you know, the advocate, you know, ally kind of situation. It's like, oh, hey, you're really nice. Yeah, okay, you know, maybe I'll give you a shot. And then go over here, and women do this to women all the time, and it's really bad, you know, and there's a lot of male advocates that are great, you know, and women are trying to get there, but women still judge women harshly, and we need to stop that. And women in powers of position, in producer positions, in director positions specifically, speaking as a director of photography, women in director positions need to give us a break and stop assimilating with white men, sorry guys, who you know, are your go-tos, right? And I get it, you know, I've been in the industry for a while. So take risks, right? That's what I'm adding to the conversation. Don't be afraid to take risks. Don't be afraid to let your guard down. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. And don't be afraid to connect with people that you're not familiar with. And give us all a chance.
So I'd actually like to speak to that. When you drive down Hollywood Boulevard, we see billboards everywhere, and you see a minimum 3 men and white women, just one woman, right? So, and if it's Catch Me If You Can, it's what, like 20 men and 1 woman. So basically that, or you can't, no, you see me, or something like that. Anyway, so what that tells us as women is that there can be only one. And it tells everybody, it's a systemic problem. It's men, it's women. We've all been told that there can only be one woman at the top and a whole bunch of people, meaning men, below them and everywhere. And this is something we have to disabuse ourselves of. And I think once we see more posters that have equality, and everywhere we see above and below the line a lot more equality, when people see us on set as grips, DPs, everything in between, then we're going to have a much happier and healthier industry, and it will go out into the world as well. And also speaking to the mental health thing and how we're judged harshly, all women are judged all day, every day. You're too fat, you're too thin, you're too pretty, you're too ugly, you're too smart, you're too dumb. And people have to stop judging us at all. If you want to wear makeup, great. You don't want to wear makeup, cool. Just let us be who we are without judging us for these superficial things. Judge us as human beings.
Exactly. I think we have time for one more question, maybe. I think someone has the mic. Yeah.
Hi. So thank you for this talk, and I actually resonate with you because, and thank you for bringing up mental health, because despite my gender and skin color, I'm on the autism spectrum. And I've been a filmmaker for about 5 years since I graduated from the Toronto Film School. So I really sympathize with your push for diversity in film. And a question I have is, I really am for furthering the conversation, but how do each of you go about talking to someone who is having a hard time grasping the concept? Because I have crossed paths with a few people over the years who I've tried to talk to about, diversity and inclusivity, and all they hear is quota, take away jobs from the white males,
Yep.
and what do you guys say to that, and you gals?
I mean, we could all
yeah.
go. What we know is that diversity sells, right? And if we're talking about the entertainment industry or any other industry, the bottom line is that everybody wants to make money. And so at this point, if you are not being as diverse and inclusive and as equitable as you can, you are literally leaving money on the table, right? So we don't have to talk about what category you want to add to it, whether that's disability or age or race or what have you. Just say, listen, look at I mean, there's so many examples now, right? Look at Coco. Last year, Coco is this story of an animated Mexican boy who wanted to play his guitar, right? That's something we've never seen before. And yet, 2 weekends in a row, Coco outperformed at the box office Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, in all of the entire Justice League movie, because it was a movie that we had never seen before, because for one of the very first time, Latinx folks could see themselves on the screen, and because it was something industry. Interesting. So if you can have this little Mexican boy that is an unknown outperform people that we've known for decades, then that goes to show you that that's where we need to be, right? So it doesn't have to be about emotion. It doesn't have to be about quotas or what have you. Just talk to them in money terms and show them the distinctions that are being made.
And there was inclusion behind the camera in that as well, and that Jermaine Franco wrote some of the music for that.
I think
amazing.
Go ahead, Sean.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that kind of like, I think when we're talking about find your tribe, that alludes to everybody's not your tribe, right? That's why you have to find your tribe. And I say that and to be, everybody doesn't want change, and you can't change everybody. And so if you can't change everybody, and we know that going into I have automatically removed my emotion from the conversation that you don't want change, because that's where you are, and you're going to stay there. And you're going to stay there because eventually it's going to affect you at the box office, that you are not changing your studio, that you are not wanting to be inclusive. So I think this idea that change is important, we have to talk about it, but we can't force our opinions onto people and expect them to take those opinions and make it important to them, because we're all so different.
I think I'll just end though with saying at its simplest, I think, level is what we're actually speaking to and asking for is balance and fair representation.
Yes.
And I think that's really important, I think, to try to get across. And to be honest, I've had difficult conversations where I've been on panels and or questioned on that level, and that's usually where I begin. But anyway, I think that's it. We have to wrap. So thank you to all of you for coming out today. Thank you to our panelists.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Leah and to Patricia and Tema and Sean and April so much, and to all of you for your thoughtful engagement. I just want to let you know there are 2 other foundation sessions happening today. One is at 2:30. It's about designers. So we have people from Shape of Water and Birdman and CBS, Star Trek All Access. So please join us for that. And we also have a session on breaking through in genre filmmaking and how genre filmmaking can help to break through social barriers and how you can do that. So please join us at 4:30 for that right here in this room. And thank you again. Have a great day.